It's showtime. Welcome back to Boxlunch.
Hey,
We're
everybody.
what's up? Awkward. Uh COVID edition again. This is
Yes.
episode 24. We've been talking about product design for the last couple of episodes.
hmm
And it's been going pretty good. We're learning a lot. We're doing a little bit more of it day by
hmm
day, transitioning into this stuff, and it's really exciting, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And in this environment, of course, there's a lot going on in terms of moves being made in product design. Uh, and we sort of look at it, there's basically two things that product design tries to solve for, and that's trying to solve challenges and also trying to pursue opportunities. And so what we've really noticed in this environment is COVID-19 is a big problem, and it's a problem for a lot of a lot of industries. Nothing, so essentially there's stuff's all been kind of messed up a little bit, and there's a lot of problems to solve. And so we feel like we're in a good position to solve some of those problems. So
Yeah.
without further ado, we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about why product design is strategically important. And more than just making a case for why product design is important, I think the key here is really seeing how strategically it can affect the business. And that's really important. That's an important thing because uh, a lot of the times, when you're dealing with certain things that agencies do, we do a fair amount of advertising and marketing. Uh, there's sometimes a temptation to look at those things as expenses and not investments. How much is this marketing campaign going to cost? Because it's typically looked at as an outward expense. Uh, but as we know, a lot of these things need to be looked at as investments. And product design I think it's an easier sort of thing to understand as an investment for a company.
Mm.
And but it is important because I think in some ways, uh, they looking at how do you invest, what are you investing in, and those sort of things, really it does matter. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how product design has sort of the timeline, what has happened in the industry that has sort of brought us to where we are now, and then sort of what's next, where are we headed, and what's
Yeah.
that future look like.
Now, would you say that companies are more aware now that they need to invest in this? And for example, if you just use like 10 years as a gauge, like where was it 10 years ago? Were companies aware that they needed to be strategic about product design? Did they even know what product design was? Did they? Because my feeling is that a lot of companies, especially the scrappy startups from 10 years ago, didn't even know they were doing product design. They were just building,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely, absolutely. And it definitely has evolved, I think. Back then too, and we'll get into this, but I think even back then, a lot of the decisions were being made on a technical thing, right? There was such an advancement in the last 10, 15 years of technology in what computers can do, that it's sort of been in the novel ideas have typically been the first ones to sort of utilize a specific way of using that technology. Video conferencing is a good example. Stuff like that, like some of the first people to sort of get it right took off. And these are all new technologies. But as we sort of, what ends up happening though is as those technologies become more commonplace, the level of experience has to go higher, right? Because now there's a competitive set to it. So if you think of the world of video conferencing, right now the big COVID story was Zoom. Zoom sort of took off. Well, as a result now, Microsoft came out with Teams, and Google Meet now is adding features every week. So what is that doing? It's creating competition within the marketplace. And so pretty soon, and the idea is that pretty soon, you know, they're going to, Zoom may look sort of antiquated, right? Because all these other services are going to come out. They're going to, it's a hot and heavy race now. The race is on. And so the question is going to be who's really going to have that best experience, that best product, who's going to invest the money into that product design to win the day, to either slow down who's winning or to keep that lead. So it does. It's definitely a competitive advantage. So let's talk about this. We'll go back to a story everyone probably is very familiar with when you talk about product design, and that's the personal computer. And kind of going back, we go back to like sort of the late 70s, early 80s, where you had IBM, who sort of ruled the day, international business machines, right? And they were sort of figuring out how to make processors smaller. Hewlett Packard, same thing. Sort of how do we miniaturize, how do we optimize a computer? Keeping in mind that most computers were owned by businesses. It was a business expense. It was sort of like, it was almost like owning like a forklift. Like nobody did it because they wanted a forklift. They had to have it. And so it was never sort of a question of, well, what color is it, or, whatever this, or, the specs, did it really matter? No, didn't really matter. So it was very much a B2B sort of thing that existed. And then, but then they started coming out with some personal computers that people could buy, but it really wasn't that interesting, and people weren't quite sure what to do with them. And then, as we know, this guy, Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, big computer nerd guys, they had like met in high school, I think, and were just basically building computers in their garage for fun. There's a hobby group. And then at some point they said, you know what, we can make these things for people, well, at first it was for hobbyists. So they went to a computer store and said, we want to take these parts that you have on your shelf. Because at the time it was like walking into Radio Shack, right? And they could see all these parts, but no one would sell the machine that you could make with them, right? So they said, we're going to take all these parts and we're going to put them together in a nice package for you, and you can sell the computer. So they started doing that, and that's sort of what got Apple Computer started. And where that sort of led was this idea of sort of bringing convenience to making it easier, right? Because you had these parts, but no one had put them together in that way. And that sort of, optimizing the hardware so it was easier to buy and use was step one. Then, of course, they get into software. Then they start working in, then they start creating, basically bring the mouse to the masses. They come out with the Macintosh, which basically creates a graphic user interface instead of a text-based one. Big leaps that happen. But fundamentally, when we look at it, it's still the same computer. They didn't reinvent the microchip. They didn't reinvent RAM or memory or storage. They were able to put the computer in a new sort of position. They created a new product, even though they were using stuff that already existed. And so that was sort of the big switch. And when that happened, then the computer industry, or the whole, not just computers in general, but I think that the consumer perspective changed, and suddenly now I could buy a computer and it's an approachable object now. It's not just a business machine. And so it created a whole new category, technically, in the world of hardware. And then you have and where I'm going with this is something that, when you look back at what product design was, and the difference was back then was typically it was run by technical people, coders, developers, engineers. There really wasn't a lot of design happening. It was sort of like, how do I do this so it's not confusing? But if you look at DOS, I mean, how did anyone design DOS? Like it's just text. It's like thinking of a language. So design, a lot of engineering. Design really didn't come in until Steve Jobs he said, look, I'm going to take some of this. And if you remember, even the Mac OS interface was a Xerox invention. Yep. And the mouse, like Steve Jobs saw that at Xerox, and he point blank asked him, like, what are you going to do with this? And he's like, and they basically told him nothing. this is just for us, or this is just something for this specific thing. We don't have any grander vision for it. But he was like mind blown, right? He saw the potential. And so, but if you sort of look at it, Steve Jobs was sort of an innovator in that way. But you can sort of look at the same time, his counterpart was Bill Gates, right? Bill Gates is an engineer through and through, right? Sort of the ultimate quintessential mega nerd. And his whole thing was not focused on design. It was very much focused on features and function. And so, even to this day, if you sort of look at Microsoft's products, they're not the most consumer friendly. And they've never sort of adapted that. They've always had their big foot in the world of business. And business consumers in that way, or business owners, they're not as discerning, right? They're like, you have to have Microsoft, you have to run Windows. There's not a lot of option there. But so design decisions aren't that as important. But when you get into the consumer world with Apple, suddenly now you have discerning tastes, right? Now people care what color your computer is or what color your monitor, because it's going to sit in your living room, right? It starts to be an expression of who you are. And where we're going with this is that when you can take something that was typically technically run, and then you bring design into it, now you can actually create a whole new category for a product that may not have otherwise existed. And so that's sort of where we're going with this, is that design can fundamentally change the direction of products and companies. So it makes it very strategic, and even though we're looking at, you might have a startup and you're like, well, we've already figured out design. We've already designed it. We're not talking necessarily about fonts and colors or your user flow necessarily, but really engaging how does this product work for specific people? What's the market? What's the use case? And can you do something like a Steve Jobs movie? Can you take something that is really similar, that whatever else exists, right? There were a number of PCs out at the same time that the Macintosh came out. How can you create something just with the same parts in that, from that Radio Shack store, and create something new, just in how you package it, how you put it together? There's a power in that, and I think that's fundamentally the thing that changed product design. It sort of gave it a push. And again, we're talking physical products. We're also talking software, but it was that bringing design into the world of technology that fundamentally changed it. So,
absolutely, and to sort of piggyback on the Steve Jobs example, MP3 players existed, right, prior to the iPod.
Yes,
I think, right?
Oh yeah,
I think they were very. The experience using them was not the best.
No, but you could get these like little Winamp, things, and some of them had.
Yeah.
I remember this one called like the Nomad or something. That was it had a hard drive in it. It was beefy. It was big, but it worked. Big old battery, big old hard drive.
And then Steve comes up here and shows you this thing, right? This small little thing with a wheel on it, and now everyone's like, "What the hell is that?"
Yes.
Right. And that's, back to, strategic product design, right? It's somebody, probably Steve, right, said we could do this better. So again, it wasn't really inventing anything, but it was, how do we take something that's existing and make it user friendly, make it desirable, right?
Right. Because up until then, like, you could buy the MP3 player, but you know how you got songs on it? You plugged it in. You had to get some other crazy app. You bootleg some MP3s, put them in. Because the other secret to the iPod was iTunes. And if you remember, they had a master stroke with that. They said, look, you can rip your own CDs and put them on this iPod. You put it in, you push a button, and you let it do its thing. And in 10 minutes, your song is digitized onto this thing. That was the hack, right? Because it was all of a sudden like, whoa, because all the other MP3 players never figured that out. They were like, well, we made this really great MP3 player, stores all these songs, blah, 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 blah. Well, how do you get them on there?
Yep.
You got to have an engineering degree, and you got to feel like you're breaking the law every time, where Apple's like, it's above board, it's clean, it's neat.
Yeah.
And it blew up. Like suddenly it was like, well, now I have to have that. It went from like, why would I want that, to now I have to have it.
Yep.
So definitely those, and like you said, creates a whole new industry that, then all of a sudden, they disrupted the world of music.
Yep.
Crazy. So
But by
absolutely.
focusing on the experience and the design, right? That
Yes.
became the product.
That became the product. And
Yeah.
so that's sort of, so now you sort of get us into the modern era of product design, which is this idea that the experience is the product. And by that, there's different people have quoted this, but essentially it comes down to the idea that people really don't care what your tech stack is. They don't care what your algorithms are. They don't care what your back end looks like and your amazing metrics. They don't care. They care about what they see and what they feel and touch and see and work with. And so when we talk about, the product as the experience, or the experience as the product, I mean, that's really fundamentally getting to a very simplified version of what makes your product special, which is that experience. So, and it sometimes you'll see people talk about it where it's really focused on the UX. Like, okay, it only takes 3 taps to get to this, or our UI is clean and nice and neat. But also too, I think when we talk about that experience, what we're really getting at as well, so you can take it a little step further, is what is sort of the feeling I'm getting from this. And that sort of, I think we'll go into sort of how we think that leads into the future of product design. But before we do, I just sort of some examples. One of the things that I think, one of the things I like to sort of reach back to, and we may have covered this as an example, is like Tinder. And one of the things I love about the story about Tinder is how, I mean, if we really think about it, the world of sort of online dating was sort of sketch. You had, it was sort of a taboo, like, you're going into online dating land, you're going to match.com. What, you can't get a date,
What is that Craigslist, that sketchy section in Craigslist?
Yes. Or is it misconnections, or is it
Yeah, no, there's some other one where it's like people looking to hook up.
Yeah.
Yeah, this sketchy, man.
Yeah, the world of online dating was sort of taboo. It wasn't necessarily anything anyone was sort of publicly like cool about. It's kind of like, and then comes Tinder, and their whole thing was just swipe left, swipe right. And we can talk about the sort of the social aspects of just flying through profiles, but it made the behavior sort of approachable, and it took, in my opinion, it took some of the stigma out of the online dating thing.
Yeah.
Because it was sort of like, you know what, we know we're going to turn people down. You're going to be attracted to people. Let's not overthink this. Let's just make it, you're making gut choices as is.
But wasn't the whole
Just
deal
go with
that
it.
they wouldn't know about it?
Right. Unless you got matched.
Right.
Right. Unless you both.
Which is genius.
Right. So, and it just sort of, it took what was sort of a tedious process, and it made it sort of like, I got 5 minutes. Let me just fly through some profiles,
Yeah.
And it changed as a result. It sort of changed people's behavior around this online dating thing, for better or worse. I mean, there's always going to be eHarmony and stuff like that, but it created this sort of, it made online dating cool, or at least there's could be the hookup culture, but it made it cool. It made it like less taboo. It made it a little more entertaining in the process, right? Whether or not it was successful, people will, debate forever. But the question, like, did people get dates from this? Who knows? Does it improve your odds? I can't tell you that. But people were using it way more often than, say, going onto their Match.com app, because it was just the interface. It was a behavior that just felt easier to do. And so in that way, but if we're again sort of thinking about it, is the dating pool any different, right? These weren't people that weren't online dating before, primarily. They already had profiles. They are already on other sites. But then they got on to Tinder and they said, all right, I'll be here too. And when you compared how much time they were spending, Tinder was probably getting, 10 times more of their attention because of that way of interacting than the others. And so it really redefined sort of that whole space. And now we even say it like swipe right, swipe left, it's sort of in the vernacular. Like that's huge, just like Apple's with, the i whatever, we joke, the i something iPhone. Remember before the iPhone existed, everyone knew it would be called the iPhone, and people were like, where's my iPhone? Before it ever had been introduced, because they sort of knew the vernacular. And so in a lot of ways, again, like this idea of the experience defining what the product is huge. And so that still exists. So,
and I'll go further and I'll say that I know we're talking about strategically, but I would say smart product design would be to acknowledge the brand, to acknowledge not just the brand of the company, but the brand of the product.
Yes.
Right. How many times have we worked with startups where their product offering is the company? They're sort of one and the same.
Yes.
And we take a look at it and we come in and see bigger opportunities to expand perhaps their product line.
Yes.
And then we come in sort of strategically help them brand the product so that they have something more to offer, but also that's within the realms of their brand itself. Yeah. Because in a lot of cases, we were talking about this earlier, there's, almost everything that exists is not unique. So there's pretty much competition in everything, right? So Tinder wasn't brand new. It was the way they did it that was new, right? There are millions of, if we're talking about tech and apps and that sort of thing, like there's millions out there. So chances are whatever you develop, there's going to be 100 or 1,000 competitors doing the exact same thing. Right.
Right. I think when we were looking at the rate of startups, I mean, it's like 1,000 a day. New startups.
Yeah, it was like 1,500 or something like that.
1,500.
Yeah.
Apps to the App Store, like 1,500 apps a day are being launched on the App Store, the Apple App Store.
Yeah.
So it's ridiculous when you really get down to it, which then sort of leads us to what we think the future is, right? So we sort of recognize that product or design can sort of change a product's, how it's utilized. For us though, we going into this, like, let's talk about sort of what happens now. Let's assume that people have gotten with the program, and we have a lot of great, well-designed platforms out there, a lot of great designed products. What then, right? What then? Now we get into the world of sort of getting into branding. And this is where, it does sort of get a little more lofty, because when you can look at, it's very easy to say, well, the experience was different. It's very much easy to sort of say, okay, I see the difference here. Where I think brand sort of plays a big role is when you have multiple products that sort of are all trying to do the same thing. What branding sort of represents a lot of the times is sort of a, what the values of those companies are. And it's sort of an easy hack in a way, because when you look at what, when we talk about taking, the bottom level is that product, then we sort of have this experience that makes that product fundamentally different. What branding can do on top of all of that is it gives it context as to like why, right? Tell us why this company is important. Tell us why you would want this product over the other, even when they're the exact same. I mean, look at cars, right? Why is there a Ford? Why is there a GM? And why is there a Tesla? And why are they all valued drastically different? They all have 4 wheels. They all have a steering wheel. They all have seats, right? Windshields. They all do the same thing. They all drive on the same roads. So why is there? Why do those even exist? Why is there, differentiation? Well, it's all about a brand, right? It's all about having a fundamentally different brand message. So when you're Ford, you say Ford things because you relate to those people, those Ford owners in a specific way, right? Mercedes, right? Same thing. BMW. And you cultivate a relationship then with your users or your customers that's deeper than just I need to get from point A to point B, right? And that's the difference, right? Because if we look like in the world of dating, I guarantee you can go download multiple dating apps that use the flipping, the card, swipe right, swipe left. It's been copied. It's sort of how you would probably do it if you're starting a new one. You would start there, right? And then maybe improve on top of that, but you would never go back to what Matches, was doing. So the same thing exists, like just with cars, like, they're all pretty much the same. They've all matched each other's technology. That's why Tesla sort of is this firebrand right now, because they said, no, we're going to do something different. We're not just going to make slight improvements. We're going to do a wholesale redevelopment of what a vehicle can be, and a company that owns it. So there's a whole thing we can go into about that. But it's that brand that sort of sets it apart. And if we're being really honest, Elon Musk is the brand of Tesla, right? They haven't spent any money on marketing.
Sure. Yeah.
But here you have this renegade billionaire, who's changing everything up. I don't know anyone who who has a Tesla that doesn't know about SpaceX, for instance, right? And so you're constantly being reminded. I mean, imagine it's like Henry Ford, back in the day. Anyone who bought a Ford knew who Henry Ford was.
Sure.
Right? And they either loved him or hated him. But that was part of the ownership, is that relationship with, and I guarantee you, once Tesla sort of steps, or Elon either steps away or whatever with Tesla, they will come in with, they'll have to have and create a strong brand that is as powerful as he is, and hopefully they'll be in good hands, because they'll have to figure that out. Because even though the product is great, people have to be able to relate these things that are somewhat abstract and put them into sort of an emotional thing. We're not robots, right? So you have to go beyond just what's the problem that needs solving, and you have to get into sort of what's the aspirations of the people who are using it, and find those things. And so part of what branding is you can start to think of it as a relationship. Like, I, as a human being, I, as Nathan, I have certain qualities and values that I aspire to. There's like sort of your ideal. This is the person I want to be. And then what happens then is you find things that sort of match that. Like, all right, I mean, clothing. What does that person dress like? What kind of car do they drive? What kind of, computer do they use? What kind of software does that person use? It's not a question of, do they have software? Of course they have software, but which one, right? And how does that define you? And just like clothes, cars, and stuff like that, there's multiple versions that all sort of do the same thing. Software and tech is going the same way, because eventually these problems get solved, and the markets that are doing well will just naturally breed competition. You can only stay so far ahead so long before the competition starts to heat up. And so product design in the future is going to be saying, okay, yes, you've developed this product, great, you're innovating, fantastic, but you need to build a brand, because there's 8 other companies right behind us or surrounding us who might relate to our customer better than we are, and we need to solidify that relationship if we're going to really build on from that. And again, you can look at Apple, did a great job of that.
Well, if you want to go really, really like modern tech, whatever you want to call it, just this new sort of ride sharing, you know, uh, created a bunch of startups, a lot
Yes.
which you probably don't even know about, but two major ones, and then now the food delivery,
Yeah.
everything from Grubhub to Postmates to DoorDash.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm sure there's more, and
Oh
then
yeah.
there's the grocery shopper delivery services. So now they're competing with each other, right? Instacart, Shipt.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I want to guess there was other ones that probably dropped dead already. That probably were either too early, or they didn't brand themselves well, or their product wasn't designed appropriately for what they were trying to do.
That's right.
There's just a whole bunch of reasons
Mm-hmm.
for it, which is why it's product design is so important, uh,
Yeah.
in sort of parallel with your brand.
Yes.
Yeah, so those two things kind of have to work hand
Because
in hand.
yeah, especially when you're going B2C. Now this is the thing, and B2B can get away with a little bit more of the technical thing, not necessarily focusing too much on brand. But we're all human, even in the business sector, you know. We can be swayed, beyond features and find, brands, if there's multiple options you have, trust me, your people are probably going to want to go with something that looks and feels more trustworthy than something that feels like, I don't know if this is even going to work. And we
Yeah.
know it instinctively, I mean, you can download, if you're looking for a specific kind of app and you download 3 options, you know instinctively which one you would trust over the others. And typically it's pretty obvious, you know. There's what looks janky, what looks
Yeah.
okay, and then what's like, oh, that's the one, you
Yeah.
know. And so, being able to perceive that is design, it's brand, it's all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And it's what really can set companies apart and products apart. So yeah, we're a constant evolution. Some of the rules change, some of them don't. It's pretty much the same journey for a lot of industries that we kind of do. I mean, airlines, you could say, would be a great example too. I mean, they all use Boeing jets. Like why is there United and why is there, Virgin Atlantic? They all use, Southwest uses the same planes as American Airlines. You know what I mean? Uh, I mean, and
The
nobody's.
experience.
It's the experience, right? It's sort of saying, okay, yes, the rates and all this kind of stuff, it does get commoditized, but that's why the brand is so important.
Yep.
That's why Southwest makes those efforts to get, to make their flights a little more fun and a little less stressful, and that's why they have put such things on these benefit programs and these frequent flyer programs, because they have to build a brand, because they know that the industry is commoditized. There's no real difference. You're flying the same machine to the same destination as a competitor. It's just ridiculous. But
Yeah.
that brand, that's why the brand has to be at the heart of what they do, and that brand, that product design, as we look at it, is key. And I think there's going to be some disruption and you see people trying to disrupt air travel,
Oh yeah.
and getting into that.
There's
I
one
think.
called JSX, I think. Have you
Uh-huh.
seen these ads? It's a um, private jet. They're trying to sell it like it's private jet sort of travel,
Hmm.
but it really isn't. It's really like one of those small. Um, which is it? What was that airline? It's basically like two seats on one side and one row of one.
Okay, so these
It's
small passenger jets.
the
Yeah.
small passenger jets. So it's, but it's the equivalent of a private jet, basically,
Hmm.
except private jets are tricked out, right? So there's like plush seating for like 8 people. This one would seat, I don't know, 50 or something
Okay.
like that.
Right.
But what they're doing is they're giving you that jet life experience,
Hmm.
but it's really kind of like a commercial
Yeah.
flight.
Yeah.
They charge you a little bit of a premium, but still way lower than flying private.
Hmm.
But you get all the benefits of flying private because you don't have to go through TSA and all that because
Right.
it's private.
And you're
You
going on a
literally
different
walk in.
hangar. Yeah, you walk up to the
Totally.
plane. You
You
probably have a
literally
little
can
drink.
show up 20 minutes before your flight.
Hmm.
Just check in, and they'll be like, "Yeah, we're good. We're gonna board
Yeah,
you." It's like getting on a bus.
right. Or like a limo. Like, hello, Mr. Smith. Let me take your bags,
Yes,
and
yes,
I'll store them for you.
that's
That
it.
concierge kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
And they're adding more and more stops, which tells me something's working.
yeah.
But like these private jets have existed for forever, but they've kept them to the top percent of people, right? The elites that could
Mhm.
afford it. Somebody said, "Screw that! I'm going to take the same jet, slap some branding around it, put more seats in it, sell it for a much lower price point,
Mhm.
and use social media to get you know a new audience, new
Yeah,
younger millennial audience who they don't want to spend a lot, but they also don't want to deal with commercial and security and all that stuff.
yeah. It's sort of a
And it's
luxury.
luxury and
We
it's
want to go
fun.
somewhere and feel like $1,000,000. Well, then
Yeah, totally.
we're gonna do this. And record the whole thing. you
No,
know.
that's completely correct because you can go on YouTube um, right now and just type in JSX and it's people doing, like kind of like reviews
Hmm.
or flying private, trying to flex a little bit, but
Yeah,
it's really,
yeah.
semi-private, I
Jet
guess.
setter life. Yeah, exactly. There you
Yeah,
go. Yeah,
see?
yeah,
People walking on the runway,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like these are some of the same planes that like JetBlue uses.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, we
Something
used to
really
call these like
different.
the little puddle jumpers. Like you'd get to a major airport and then you're like, oh, I got to get in this little, you know, crappy jet and fly the rest of it over. You know,
Right.
and they're like, they just flipped it. They're like, no,
And this
that's
is
luxury. Just walk up to
product
it.
this is product design,
Absolutely,
right?
100%.
Hassle-free, line-free, that easy. It's like how do we package this experience and sell it, you
Right.
know? And
Instead
that
of making
there's
it an inconvenience, you know.
exactly,
And that's branding right there, And now think about it too. Now they can say it's even safer. Why? Because you're not having to go through a major terminal
right?
during a
Oh,
during a
yeah,
pandemic.
that's right.
You know?
I mean, they haven't by any means shut down.
No. In fact, you could justify a reason why you'd pay a premium to fly to the same place.
Yep. I mean,
You
look at
know?
that. That's selling right there too. It's very specific audience. I mean,
The experience. Psst,
yeah.
there it is. Yeah.
Who wouldn't want to travel like this?
Right.
And then
Yeah. There's the
show up
waiting
to
room.
show up to a lounge, get a
Yeah.
free drink and a snack.
Yeah. Instead of a loud terminal.
Yeah, and you get a free alcohol on the flight.
There you go.
Very, very smart.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, right now, pretty much if you're on the West Coast, I mean, you can, from here, jump to Vegas, jump to the Bay Area,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Phoenix. And that's just the beginning, Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
I think they'll just keep adding. The more successful they get, the more
Yeah. And what's the
what
overhead on
they'll
those
add.
jets, compared to like a 747? Like,
Yeah, because otherwise they're just idle until someone books it,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So these guys they'll just keep it operational, which is cool. I mean, Orange County to Las Vegas. Let's just see. I mean, look at that. $69 flights, dude, to Vegas.
That's
That's
cheaper
that's
than driving.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. 69 bucks one way.
Yeah. Yeah, they're onto something there.
I mean, yeah, that's. Anyways, I was thinking about them when you were talking. I'm like, that's smart
Yep.
product design right there, and
Absolutely.
branding, and
Yes.
branding.
And the branding, right?
Feels premium.
Because let's be honest, like there's probably other people who've tried to do that, but unless it looks like it's worth that, you know, unless you got the guy with the you know, the duffel
Yep.
bag and, you know, walking up to the plane looking all swagger, you're not going to sell it, you know. You
Yeah,
can
but you
say
gotta you gotta deliver though,
you got to deliver,
right? You gotta deliver
right?
on that.
But you know, I guarantee you this sort of business model has existed in the past where they're like, yeah, you can just rent a private jet, or, you know, they're like, yeah, you can hop on for this much or whatever. But they took that and they turned it into a brand, built the experience around it, you know,
Yep.
all those things. And now it's sort of it can be a thing, you know, something that's aspirational, not like, oh, that would be useful, but like, ooh, I might have to do that, you know,
You
just to
want to
do it.
do it.
Just
Yeah.
you want to do it,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, imagine
Because
that.
Southwest will cost you, if you're comparing deals, you could, from here, obviously, you could score a $49 flight or $49, $59 flight. But what's the hassle around everything else, right?
Yeah,
Just thinking
exactly.
about the airport, security, waiting, right? You're burning 2-3 hours between commute, traffic or commute to the airport,
Hmm.
security waiting,
Hmm.
and then the same thing on the other end. If you're going to Vegas, it's a huge airport, you know.
Yeah,
It's walking, it's baggage claim, it's getting a ride, it's
right,
finding your car, ride share, whatever.
right,
You're already, it's, an hour and a half, an hour and a half before you can get to your property. And this plane lands somewhere off the airport,
right.
you
Well,
know.
here's the thing. There are, I think, nationwide, like 400 regional airports. We call, you know, like major airports. There's like 20,000 municipal airports that are
Wow.
small little things, but you can fly private jets out of them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I mean, Santa Monica has a municipal airport. Long Beach has one. I mean, around here, Torrance has one. I mean, imagine you just got to drive 30 minutes to get to, you know, I'm sure around you there's tons. And it's just,
Oh yeah.
you know, yeah, imagine flying out of those instead of having to go all the way to LAX or, you know, the Ontario airport, you know, man, save yourself some time.
Heck
It's
yeah.
worth it. So,
Totally.
yeah, that's exactly it, right? And they're taking
Yeah.
something that's been around, you know,
Yeah.
been around, adding a new experience to it, but it's not just the experience. They actually built a brand around it, and now you have something that, yeah, there you go. Now you have something that has pull, has value, much more
Yeah.
value. You know, because now they can even say, what is it, JSX,
Yep.
right? And you can see it. They're like, we'll extend the experience, right? You want the full JSX experience? Well, now you can book a hotel when you get there,
Yeah.
right?
They're starting to do that.
Right? You can you
Packaging it up.
Yeah, you can have a whole travel experience. You can make a JSX trip, you know, and we'll do a tour. You know, it's not just travel now. It's what else sort of fits within that JSX brand, you know, and that's how you grow.
Yeah.
That's how it's done. So
I
anyway,
mean, come on,
there you go.
right?
Get to spend more time with my family, right? That's it. But it's sort of, you frame it that way. You build a thing around it. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
and win Las Vegas, right?
JSX must win.
Yeah. So you get perks and stuff for even flying.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a no-brainer.
And
So
cool. Good
anyway,
stuff.
so yeah,
Thanks for
that's
tuning
what we're up
in. And
to. Yeah.
that's what we're up to. And we'll probably catch you on the next one. Sound good?
Yeah, let's do it. Stay safe out there, everyone.
Thanks for the 3.5 people that joined the stream. Catch us on the next one. We'll put this on our blog too. So wearesitebox.com is our website. I'll put it here. And we will be posting more blogs up as time goes on. So there's some cool stuff there. If you want to check it out. Till next
Appreciate it.
time.
Yeah.